I often think about Daniel's parents, who you don't hear anything about. Yeah. But they must have laid down the foundation for Daniel to be able to go into Babylon and not fall.
So we were sitting in your living room, watching the boys shoot baskets, and Timmy's throwing me his ball and I'm throwing it back. And you and I were talking about preparing our kids for Babylon, right? Because we see culture kind of crumbling around us. It looks like this could be the last gasp for our great constitutional republic, right? I mean, it's not hard to see that things are kind of falling apart. And so you were talking about preparing our kids for Babylon. I want you to talk about some of the biblical models of kids who were prepared for the culture war.
I'll tell you what, immediately my mind goes to Daniel and his companions. But more than Daniel and his companions, I often think about Daniel's parents, who you don't hear anything about. Yeah. But they must have laid down the foundation for Daniel, for Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, to be able to go into Babylon and not fall. Like because there were other Jewish boys, there were other boys that went, and did the things that the king said to do, ate the food, bowed down and all, but they're mentioned because they didn't do it. And I just wonder, what did Daniel's parents and those boys, their parents teach them, And I can imagine you have the prophet Jeremiah preaching, he's like saying, hey, you're going to be in captivity. It's going to happen. Nebuchadnezzar's coming. And you have all these people like, oh, no, don't listen to him. Don't listen to him. I got to imagine that Daniel's parents and his friends, they were like, no. We gotta listen to Jeremiah and all those other prophets who were saying that. Now they had many false prophets saying otherwise, but there were a few. There was Jeremiah and a few. So I think about their parents, and I'm like, man, they did a great job because you got to understand, and I think we all know this, that these young men were like 15, 14, 13 years old going into Babylon. They were not like grown men, but they were so strong in what they knew and what they believed in God, man, they did not fold. And so when I think about our children today, I think about my kids. It's like I said, I have 6. The youngest is 3. And I wonder what this world would be like if Jesus is, I'm thinking Jesus would be back. But, but what would this world be like, when he's 20? I don't know. If I'm gauging things by what I see now, I'm like, man. So I feel the responsibility and the burden to do something that I feel like Daniel and his friends, that their parents did for them. And that's to get them ready. I often talk about being raised to be ready. To be ready. And that's what we have to do. And so first and foremost, a love of God. Love for God, like understanding but then, understanding his word and training them up and even showing them during the hard times and situations that happen, man, we don't lose heart. We don't turn our backs on God, even with the allures of the world, because you got to think that when Nebuchadnezzar was offering something, they were like, oh yeah, we'll eat the food. We'll, to some of these other boys, but they were like, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to do something different. We're going to stand opposed to the culture. They were brought into a place where they were being taught a new language. Their names have been changed. It was a 3-year indoctrination program. Like, man, and you're talking about, teenagers or younger. And I'll often ask myself, man, how many of our teens in the church will be able to do what Daniel and his friends did? I don't know, and so it's really important that we as fathers take that seriously, because where we're living now, it's like a modern day Babylon. All around us, you have, sexual deviancy, you have violence, you have lawlessness, you have, every man is doing what's good in his own eyes, that type of thing, your truth, whatever your truth is. Man, so we have to be vigilant in training our children, to be able to grow up in a place like this and still have a fidelity to God and a allegiance to God.
Amen. Yeah, one of the things that strikes me about what you're talking about is it wasn't just that the parents had prepared the kids to behave in a certain way.
Right.
It was that the parents had prepared the kids to understand who they were, their identity.
Yes.
Because you mentioned their names were changed.
Yes.
But dads, I want you to open up Daniel this week and read through the first part of Daniel, and you're going to catch something. Their names were changed to the names of the gods of those people.
Yes.
Their identity as Jewish boys was taken. Not only that, where were they living, Will? They were living under the care of the chief eunuch. Mm-hmm. See, if you were going to serve the king, you didn't get to serve the king as a full man. So these kids they had major surgery to become the servants of the king. These were boys who had been made eunuchs. And if you can imagine tough times, right? And knowing who you are, they had had their manhood taken away. They had had their names taken away. They were given the names of false gods and idols in this land. And then they were offered the blessings of the king's food and the king's favor. And yet these boys stood firm. This episode of Rapid Response was brought to you by CTC Math. Visit them at ctcmath.com today.